Let's do this! We've been doing several countdowns to build up hype for RWBY Volume 6, and now it's time to finish it all off with the top 5 worst issues the show has dealt with, topped off with a word on why I criticize the show, and how it can do better. All aboard the literal hype train for Volume 6, because it's a literal train, goddammit Barb! With that out of the way, let's get going. Whenever people talk about RWBY's lack of a plot, what they mean is that the show never seems to know what storylines to focus on, how much to focus on them, and when to give them each their own spotlight. For example, Volume 1's second half is a series of unrelated issues regarding Ruby and Weiss conflict, Jean's struggle in being Jean, and Blake fighting racism.
Brothers of the White Fang! Yes! Why are you aiding this scum?
There's no continuous thread connecting all of these stories together in a cohesive way. At least not one that naturally builds to where all these storylines culminate together. As Celtic Phoenix points out in his Fixing RWBY Volume 1 video, Volume 1's focus should have been a largely character-driven story focusing on developing Team RWBY's dynamic with just a dash of Team Juniper. Simply by rearranging certain events and plot points, altering little details here and there, you get a much more cohesive story from the rough foundation Volume 1 set out on, but never built upon. The other volumes suffer from this to varying degrees. Volume 2 is better in that it actually seems to have a plot, but it seems to drop almost all focus on it during the dance chapters, and the Breach and Mountain Glen plots don't really culminate this plot in a satisfying way. Volume 3 probably has the strongest focus out of all of them, but that's simply because of its second half, whereas its first half is almost as incohesive as Volume 1. Volumes 4 and 5 have improved on this issue to a certain degree. Volume 4 as a whole is the most consistent of all the volumes in terms of stakes and characters actually being active in their stories. Volume 4 knows what to focus on, it's just juggling between them all that seems to be the issue. And Oscar's story. They kinda took a hatchet to Oscar's story. Volume 5 definitely isn't as focused as 4, but its problems more stem from its lack of things actually happening, its bland exposition and dialogue, and its character arcs, which we'll get to later. Though I do plan on tackling what Volume's 5 focus should have been and how it could have been great as a result in a future video essay. For right now though, let's just pray Volume 6 knows what the fuck it's doing. With the loss of Monty Oum, the action scenes have undoubtedly taken a hit in quality. Some fights in Volume 3 were great, and others not so much. And in Volumes 4 and 5, fights are much less frequent and generally nowhere near as energetic as they once were. But this isn't on the animators at all. In fact, the Tyrion and Crow fight in Punished was amazing, as is the brief clash between Sun and Ilya in True Colors, and the fight between Yang and the Bandits in Lighting the Fire. One of the animators, Kim Newman, made that glorious gunchuck show in about a week. So then, what gives? Why are the other fights so underwhelming while this one encounter was spectacular? It's simple. It wasn't pre-scripted. Since Monty's passing, Miles and Carrie have storyboarded the series rather than using key poses in their animation program, then Poser, now Maya. As a result, the animators don't have nearly as much freedom to experiment with the choreography, momentum, and cinematography of their fight scenes, and as a result, everyone is teleporting at least 3 times per fight scene, or just regular scene, and the actions become much more sluggish with less impact. I doubt Volume 6 will be much different since it's already been in production for so long, but let's hope Miles and Carrie are willing to give the animators more freedom for 6's fight scenes. Whenever someone says character development, oftentimes what they're actually talking about is character depth. To clarify, character depth refers to information about the character, their background, personality, motivations, etc., that fleshes them out into a 3-dimensional character. Character development, on the other hand, refers to a change in the character, good or bad, and that process of development is referred to as a character arc. RWBY's problem? Well, it has a decent grasp on character depth, but seems to struggle in how to implement character development. Oddly enough, each member of Team RWBY embodies a different problem in how arcs are handled. For Ruby Rose herself, it's a lack of character development, to no one's surprise. She has inklings of character depth, wanting to make the world a better place, undying optimism, and also a dead mom she never talks about. But it's never gone beyond that. She's virtually the same person she was in Volume 1 by Volume 5, not once seeming to question herself or her values. Now normally this would be fine. This would actually be what we call a paragon character, a character who's incredibly optimistic and is a ray of light to the people around them. They don't experience a lot of development, mainly because they are the goal, the ideal themselves. The issue is that RWBY doesn't really have an impact on the people around her, much less her teammates, meaning the paragon effect doesn't really apply to her. Blake, on the other hand, is several attempts in vain at character development without thinking through what kind of arcs would fit her to begin with. Specifically in Volumes 1 and 2, her character changes rapid fire from episode to episode between someone who's experienced great trauma and wants to be left alone, to someone who's pretty chill and is actively trying to be a part of the team. This all would be fine if they were meant to be part of her character development, but they're not. Never does she confront this inner conflict of wanting to be with people but remaining afraid to trust or hurt them. Then in Volume 4, she runs away from her friends without a word, blaming herself for Yang losing her arm to Adam. But her trauma from this abusive, toxic relationship is hardly explored, as if the writers didn't think this was worthy of being explored in lieu of... Honestly, I'm not even sure what they wanted out of Blake in Volume 4. They did kind of fix her in Volume 5, making her more of a paragon character, as I mentioned before, but the damage has been done. Blake's arcs, like her character, have been incredibly amorphous and disconnected. There's no real structure to them, so while she does have character development, it ain't well done character development. Yang's arcs are much better in terms of structure, but their problem is that they aren't well connected, at least in Volume 5. They don't really flow into one another. In Volume 1, her issue was just the lack of character depth to begin with, but she received depth in Volume 2, and a serious jolt in character development as she doubted herself and her sanity, and then lost her arm in Volume 3. Volume 4 did a decent job in her recovery arc, if missing some pretty important pieces here and there, but it was at least going well. But then in Volume 5, they show hints at her trauma, but they don't go anywhere with it. She's totally fine with ejecting her automail arm both in a lighthearted situation and in combat, when in reality, she should be in total shock over what's just happened and verging on a panic attack. Instead, the story seems to focus on her abandonment issues in regards to Rayon and Blake, but those arcs are a mess structurally and are never actually connected to where they make for satisfying development. The reason Weiss is the best written of the four, and why I think she's the favorite for a lot of people, is that she has both solid character depth and character development. She goes from a spoiled racist brat to much warmer group therapist / group mom in a very satisfying and natural progression from Volume 1 to Volume 5. Really, her biggest issue is that her arcs get rushed, meaning we're kind of thrown from one right into the other until we get whiplash, but at least her arcs are actually woven together to where they feel organic. And these issues spread widely throughout the entire show, not only in the other character arcs, but the story as a whole. Major moments of tension or character growth or exposition either seem to be amorphous, not thought through, severely disjointed, rushed, or just straight up missing, and it makes for a generally unpleasant audience experience. Isn't it nice how quickly Rooster Teeth churns out RWBY volumes, how every volume recently seems to start in October and end around January or February, with you resting assured they'll repeat the cycle that October? Well, while it might satisfy very impatient viewers, it comes at a cost, and that cost is quality. Given that RWBY has been such a huge success, Rooster Teeth has tried to profit off the show as much as possible. Merch, arguably shitty video game tie-ins, and a new batch of episodes every fall. From a business perspective, this makes perfect sense. However, this also leads to rushed scripts, rushed animations, and just a rushed production in general. Right as Volume 5 aired, Miles and Carrie still hadn't finished the script of at least the final episode, which brings into question whether the scripts were even able to have gone through a rigorous revision process before it was even handed to the voice actors. As such, Volume 5 comes across as a mediocre foundation that reads like a first draft, from the aforementioned disconnected arcs and themes, to the nonsensical events and bad pacing. And it's not just in the writing, but also in the animation. Sets tend to look incredibly similar to one another throughout the Forests of Mistral, and there have been numerous changes in footage between the initial first member release on the Rooster Teeth website, the YouTube release, and even the Blu-ray release. Now, it should be said that this tends to be common practice specifically in anime studios nowadays, but for me personally, I'm not a fan of this at all. And if your production process can at all be compared to anime studios that literally treat their workers like slave labor, that's not a good thing. That's really not a good thing. What RWBY needs is more time between its volumes for Miles and Carrie, and ideally some other writers, but I digress on that right now, to write and revise their scripts, start pre-production, and ideally finish at least half the volume production-wise before even thinking about airing it. I really do think it would solve a lot of its problems, as Volume 5 seems to have been the result of this rushed production cycle finally catching up with RWBY. Whether Volume 6 has taken advantage of this hindsight, we'll have to wait and see. A common defense of the first 3 volumes taking their sweet time to really get the plot of RWBY started is that it was all necessary setup. They needed that time to set the stage, introduce us to the world and characters, and then get us engaged. My question is, why do you need over 3 years to grab your audience? This kinda ties back in with the lack of focus the earlier volumes had, but the problem with keeping things a secret for a grand reveal way down the line is that you have to give the audience something to hold their attention and make them care in the meantime. You can't just hold off on a promising story and give them scraps hoping they'll stick around, and if I'm being honest, that's kinda shady. Okay, not shady. That's legitimately what the actual fucking fuck territory. Volumes 1 through 3 hinted at a greater story to do with whatever Cinder was planning and who she was working for, and in exchange we were given a disjointed, poorly structured plot with stopping Roman and the White Fang from... see? I don't even know. Normally I would defend this as a red flag to the audience that something is up, but that's just me being very forgiving. A lot of people will not be that nice in giving you the benefit of the doubt. Even now, we still don't know who Salem is, where she came from, what she wants, or why she hates Ozpin. We have no idea whether Ozpin is really shady, or if he's just a nice, well-meaning guy, and we don't even know what the relics do. Fuck, we're still asking about Silver Eyes because no one in the show seems to be asking these questions. And the longer you hold back the answers to these questions, the bigger your audience's expectations will get, and the better your revelations better be. And that's not the fault of the audience for expecting too much. That is on you as the creator for making them naturally anticipate something huge from literally years of build-up. We're talking years of people's lives they spent wondering what big reveal you're building to. This had better be worth holding them off from doing, I don't know, whatever productive people do. But despite all of this, I still love the show. No matter what happens, whatever plot hole or bad decision I might rant about comes next, I'm pretty sure I'll always be obsessed with RWBY. It holds a special place in my heart, and I doubt that's ever going to change. I criticize the show because I love it. I am honest because I want to see it improve. If I didn't care or hated the show, I'd have either dropped the show in the first place, or worse in my view, have remained content with what I've been given and not even bothered speaking to begin with. I made these countdown videos to express both my praises and my gripes with the series, as well as to build up hype till Volume 6, and definitely to make the wait go by faster. I just recently went to the Volume 6 theatrical premiere, and I'm willing to bet I really did enjoy it. Time doesn't exist in Remnant, nor does it in YouTube, apparently. So, there it is. My honest view on the show and where it could go. You're welcome to have your own opinion, whether you feel the show is still perfect, or if you think it's hot trash that's just a waste of everyone's time. I'm just one person out of many sharing my opinions, so whether you listen to what I have to say, whether you agree or disagree, or whether you're civil or call me either a fake fan or a sheeple, know that so long as RWBY is around, I will be too. Anyways, if you enjoyed this and are interested in seeing my future content on Volume 6, feel free to subscribe and ring that bell for notifications, because YouTube hates creators. If you'd like to further support the channel, you can pledge over on Patreon and join the lovely patron family, or check out the links to my upcoming book in the description below. I'm the Unicorn of War, and this has been a shit show.
They will be lost to you.
What's the plan, RWBY?
Don't let anyone else die!
What's the plan, RWBY?